every now and then, we'll see a Republican in this country in a position of power have one of those eureka moments. They actually catch themselves off guard a little bit, and they're willing to admit the truth to the American public about how horrible their party is and how horrible their party has been. And the most recent Republican to have one of those moments was David Frum, the former speechwriter turned columnist, who admitted on MSNBC this week that it is in fact his party, the Republicans, who seem to have a problem with democracy. Because anytime there's an actual attack on American democracy, according to David Frum, it's coming from inside the Republicans' house. Here is what Frum had to say. He said, the attack on democracy we've seen is not a Trump-specific problem. And he's right about that. This has been Republican policy for decades. Look, we have states where we have 45% of the vote, the Republican Party, and it's always the Republican Party, gets close to 65% of the seats. It is not just south of the Mason-Dixon line. Michigan and Wisconsin are very bad actors. So what he's talking about is gerrymandering, right? And that is an attack on democratic institutions, not democratic as in party, but democratic as in the democracy part of the United States, so the House of Representatives, and that institution. Gerrymandering is an attack on that. And he's absolutely right. We have seen states where you have a Republican population that makes up, 30 to 40% of the overall population. The rest is Democrat. Yet somehow, through gerrymandering, Republicans get the majority of seats. It's remarkable. If you look at Dan Crenshaw's district in Texas, you've got a little blob, and then it has this big arm that goes out and just circles around, grabbing up all these little Republican areas so that Dan Crenshaw can actually stay in Congress. If it weren't for that, nobody would know or even care who Dan Crenshaw is. And I bring him up frequently for gerrymandering because he is just absolutely a horrible, horrible, horrible congressman. But what Frum doesn't understand is that it's not just gerrymandering. Gerrymandering is a small part of it. I think the bigger part is the right to vote that Republicans around the country for decades have repeatedly attacked. I mean, that's about as big of a democratic institution as you can get. The actual act of participating in a democracy. And all of the attacks on that are always coming from the Republican Party. I'm disappointed that Frum didn't mention that because I know he knows about it. Because after all, David Frum would not have been able to serve in a George W. Bush administration had it not been for voter suppression acts by the Republican Party, both in the year 2000 and 2004. Because if it weren't for the illegal voting purges that took place in the state of Florida in the year 2000, Bush would not have won Florida, therefore would not have won the election. The same voter purges also happened in both Florida and Ohio in 2004, thus giving Bush enough votes to go ahead and carry victory there too. So either way you slice it, Bush would not have won and Frum would not have ever been in an administration, or at least not in the last 20 years, if it were not for these acts. And I think Frum needs to understand that. He needs to analyze it a little bit deeper too and realize, oh, crud, my entire career is predicated upon Republican attacks on the very institutions that make up a democracy.